Okay, so that everyone is aware, we are live on YouTube. We are recording at this point. I'm going to go ahead. I know we're missing some people. Hopefully we've got enough here for the quorum. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Our NIAA Realignment Committee for the fall 25 through spring 28 alignment period is being called to order at 9:01 a.m. on October the 15th, 2024. At this point, I will go ahead and do a roll call. Please indicate that you are here by saying so. Brooke Formaster. Joshua Katz.
Here.
Thank you. Miles Baldwin.
Here.
Thank you. David Vick. Don't see David in the room. Sean Fitzsimons.
Present.
Thank you. Ken Parker.
Here.
Thank you. Mike Brooks.
Here.
Thank you. Sarah Scott. Phil Tao.
Here.
Thank you. Dallas Larson.
Present.
Thank you. Jason Odegaard. Rob Cottrell. Wade Pearson.
Here.
Thank you. Paul Sullivan. Tammy Habig.
Here.
Thank you. Tony Polzian.
Here.
Thank you. Domingo Rivera. Isabel Sanchez.
Here.
Thank you. Art Anderson.
Here.
Thank you. Darvell Bell.
Here.
Thank you. Freeman Holbrook. Chris Magram.
Here.
Thank you. Mike Kofer.
Here.
Thank you. Xavier Anthium.
Here.
Thank you. Bob Levitt.
Here.
Thank you. Bart Davis is here. Tia Wonder, I know, is absent. Timothy Jackson.
Here.
Thank you. Paul Anderson.
Here.
Thank you. Paul Anderson, I think we've got a quorum by my count.
Hey, I joined in late, by the way, Bart, Lou Marcuses.
Thank you, Lou. Actually, it's going to bring me up to something I need to talk about in just a moment. Before we get there, on pages 2 and 3, numbered 2 and 3, at least of your packet, is the agenda for today's meeting. We do need to approve this agenda before we go any further, so I will ask for a motion to approve today's agenda.
Dallas Larson, 3A South. I motion that we approve the agenda and then make it flexible.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Do we have a second?
Tony Polzian, I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Polzian. Any further discussion, comments, questions? Hearing none, I will ask that all in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? All right, thank you, everybody. We've approved the agenda. If you would shuffle forward then to pages 4 through 7 of your packet, we have the minutes from our August 28th, 2024 meeting. This was our in-person meeting in the office in Sparks. Hopefully you've had a chance to look through these. We will ask somebody if they would please to make a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from our meeting in Reno.
Thank you. Ms. Habig, do we have a second?
Sean Fitzsimons, 2A South. Bart, I'll go ahead and make second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzsimons. Any further questions, discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. Before we get to the next item, Ms. Formaster and Mr. Odegaard have now joined us in this meeting, so they are here. Let's move forward to pages 8 and 9. These are our minutes from our September 5th meeting. This was the one that we did virtually, a very quick meeting to just go over the actual wording of our policies and procedures. We will entertain a motion to approve these minutes. Looking for a motion.
Miles Baldwin, 1A North. I motion to approve the minutes from September 5th.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. Do we have a second?
Peter Parker, 2A South, second.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Any further questions or discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, just a little point of clarification here. Please do make sure that when we're saying aye or nay, either one, that we do unmute and have our voices heard. Moving on to item number 6, chair comments or announcements. Mr. Marcus is here, and he had actually informed us, as had Mr. Cole, of their need to step away from this committee. Mr. Marcus, I know, has gotten a different position within CCSD. We congratulate him on that. Both of them, we thank you for your time, for your energy, for your knowledge, for your input in this. Mr. Marcus, anything you would like to say?
Yeah, I just, I know it was a short time, but I'm logged in here just as a kind of a transitional thing, because I know this was a separate thing, but hopefully that I'm confident that there'll be the right voices for this committee to help our kids out in the great state of Nevada.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. Just one-on-one too, I want to thank you. You and I have had some discussions about realignment. I really do appreciate your feedback and your input. Thank you so much for being on this committee, sir. That being said, we had 2 open voting member spots, and we have had 2 people step up to fill those positions. Domingo Rivera was already on our committee as a consultant. He is moving into a voting role, and we are very pleased to welcome to our committee the principal at Southeast Career and Technical Academy, is Isabel Sanchez, who is now with us. And she will provide a wonderful voice as well and some great background and knowledge. Ms. Sanchez, anything you'd like to say to the committee here as we welcome you on board?
No, absolutely not. Thank you for welcoming me, and I look forward to the collaboration. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate you being here. All right, we will move on now to public comment, and I have to scroll back. Sorry if I'm kind of making the eyes go buggy for everybody. This time provides an opportunity for citizens to address the committee about any matter not listed on the agenda. Items raised during this portion of the agenda cannot be deliberated or acted upon until notice procedures of the open meeting law have been met. Should a member of the public wish to speak on a matter not listed on the agenda, it is asked that said person complete a public comment card and submit it to an NIAA staff member prior to the opening of this item. A limit of 3 minutes per person and/or 5 minutes for the spokesperson of a group may be imposed. It is requested that comments be directed to the committee as a whole. Comments deemed to be irrelevant, repetitious, offensive, inflammatory, willfully disruptive, or deemed to be personal attacks will not be permitted. I do have 1 public comment submitted by email. Before we get to that, Mr. Jackson, you are in the office in Sparks. Is there anybody there wishing to make public comment?
No, there is not.
Thank you, sir. Anybody at any of our other locales around the state who wish to make public comment? Okay, I will read the 1 public comment we do have into the record. This comes from Ricky Shepard. Good morning. I am not sure how this all works. I do have some questions and concerns about the whole process. I'm a parent of a former NIAA CCSD student and currently a coach for CCSD as well. My first question is, how does Northern Nevada get away with picking and choosing what sports they participate in 5A sports in? If 5A is Nevada's highest division, I feel like we should have a true 5A champion in all sports. The example I will go with is girls soccer. Currently, Northern Nevada doesn't participate in 5A soccer, so the 5A champion comes only from the South. In 4A, the South has 19 teams and Northern Nevada has 10. Out of those 19 from the South, 8 make playoffs, whereas 8 out of the 10 up north make the playoffs. That's a big disparity. Doesn't seem fair to the South teams. Currently, 5A girls soccer only has 9 teams, with Bonanza, who was moved up to 5A with the last realignment, not fielding a team this year. If you look at most of the top teams currently in girls 4A soccer, most of them came from 5A with the last realignment. Something needs to change in girls soccer for the next realignment. My other topic is how these leagues divisions are formed. You have teams playing each other who are on opposite sides of town, but there are teams in the same division, but different leagues a lot closer to one another. There needs to be a better balance. This is happening in all sports. It will help with increased attendance, but also cut back on travel time for students to and from these events. So when you guys realign these divisions for next year, please keep in mind what schools are on what side of town and try to keep them in the same leagues. Thank you for your time. Okay, I have no other. Mr. Jackson, do you have any other that came electronically, public comment?
No, that's all, but also note that Mr. Cottrell has joined the meeting.
I was just going to say that, but thank you for reminding me. I appreciate that. Mr. Cottrell is here. Thank you. Okay, that closes public comment, and we move on to number 8 on our agenda, which is the creation of policies and procedures guiding the alignment for football only from 2025 to 2028. This is for possible action, and this is the reason we are meeting today. Our Board of Control, when they met at their fall meeting, approved policies and procedures with the exception of football and kicked that back to this committee. As you'll recall, we put forward basically having the same setup that we've had for this alignment cycle for the next cycle. That included 7 championship games, 5A Division 1, 2, and 3, along with 4A, 3A, 2A, and 1A. The board was not keen on that idea. An original motion was made. The original wording of that motion, I should say, was made that this realignment committee look at this again and come up with 5 championship games. That was tweaked as the process went along, and it was ended up being a motion. And please correct me, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Paul Anderson, anybody else that is a liaison to our board. That motion came back as fewer than 7 championship games, but it was there was some talk in that meeting that 5 was the number. That's not what the motion said. The motion said fewer than 7, but Mr. Jackson, I want to bring you in on this before we get any further along down the road. It seemed clear from at least a couple of the members of the board, 5 was the number they were looking for.
Correct.
Is that correct, sir?
Correct. That was the number they were looking for. It was stated numerous times. But the motion did not reflect that. The motion was come back with something different. So you are correct in your statement there.
Thank you. So what we're looking at today is needing to come back with something that is fewer than 7. One thing that we have talked about in our office as a staff, and I have mentioned it to a couple of people who seem to be receptive to it, is taking what we currently have for our 5A Division 1, 5A Division 2, combining those into just 5A, taking our 5A Division 3 and our 4A and combining those into a 4A. We could still have the movement between 5A and 4A that we currently have between Division 2 and Division 3. That to me becomes maybe the easiest way to combine these to get to 5. I don't know that it's necessarily the best way to combine these to get to 5. Before we even start trying to come up with a motion or anything that we want to do, I want to open this up for discussion among members of our committee.
Haley Green, Cecilia Gerber, Ethan DeBeaver, Andrew Crossman, and Justice Cortez, please.
Miss Habig, looks like you're ready.
I am. I've been thinking about it a lot, but can someone explain to me how that's any different than what we did before?
It's not entirely different, that's for sure. I think we would be kind of squeezing a little bit the
Literally going
numbers of
back
4A.
to, right, we're literally going back to exactly what we had before, correct?
The difference is this, Bart, I think you stated that, remember, we didn't have the relegation like we do before. The relegation of the top one, the up and down between the 5A, 1, 2, 3, and 4 is new. That was new for this past alignment. So that would be something different. I hate to say it that way. That would be something that we didn't have in the previous alignments. But I don't disagree that we are going back to the 5.
Yeah, that's exactly what, I mean, to me, just hearing it, it's going back to exactly what we did before, except maybe the bottom 2 teams in 5A go to 4A and 4A comes up.
Well, and the 5 classifications would indeed be statewide under this too, as opposed to just 4 of them being statewide. Mr. Levitt, I don't know if you were ready to speak, sir. It looked like you had unmuted there for a moment.
Yeah, Bob Levitt for the record. And thanks for bringing that up, Tammy. But again, I was just going to clarify the same thing that you just said, that we would now have statewide competition in all divisions. We'd have a 4A in the north that we haven't had in a while in the north for football.
Other comments on this? Other discussion? If this is not an idea that this committee wants to go with, we need to come up with something to take this back to our Board of Control. We do have an emergency meeting for the Board of Control coming up that this would be heard in. We need to get this passed before we can set an alignment for football that we're talking about doing on December 3rd. So something we've got to make some tracks here, basically.
Art, just real quick,
Yeah.
Art Anderson, 4A, 5A North. If the discussion is that we go only to 5, then I have to believe that the people that I represent, they would want us to be 4A. They would not want that. It would take us back 3 years ago that the whole argument was that we were forced into the 5A to begin with, and that we would only that we would go 4A in the north, that we wouldn't have a 5A.
Other comments?
Tony Polzing, 4A, 5A
Yeah.
South. I respectfully, to that point, I believe there's some sports in the north where they belong in 5A, if I'm being honest. And I get it. We're just going to go back to what we had, and this seems like the easiest fix is to combine 1A2, 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4A. But I don't see any other way to do it. But I think we need to look at this sport by sport again. And I know this is just football only, but I mean, I'm sorry. There's some teams up north that just do not belong in 4A, if I'm being perfectly honest, in some sports.
And Tony, to counter that response, I was just simply talking football, and I apologize if I was misunderstood about that. I thought we were mostly focusing on football.
Sorry.
But I
Yeah,
would
no.
agree. I would agree that there's teams in football that have no business in 4A up north.
And just to be clear, I don't mean to jump on anybody in this discussion. What we are talking about here is for football only. Everything else we have had approved by our Board of Control. What we need to get something through that our Board of Control will approve is for football.
And again, we would only have 12 schools max in this either 4A or 5A. So if we separated into a 5A and a 4A, then we're talking that we would only have probably 6 schools in either one of those conferences as well.
It would be
Or
very
leagues.
similar to what you have right now, where half of that group is in a 5A Division 2 and the other half of that group would be in a 5A Division 3. Because we've already talked about for the North, the 3A being enrollment based only. So we'd be looking at 12 of those schools in a split of likely 6 and 6 for the North. 6 would be 5A, 6 would be 4A.
Tony Polzing, 4A, 5A South. And maybe this is, we decide this today. I know like kind of the relegation model, it's like 2 and 2. With the increased number of teams per division, would that increase the amount of teams that could be relegated up or down, or no? Are we going to stick with 2?
That's flexible. This committee can decide upon that. What I've jotted down in my notes is it would be 2 and 2, but that doesn't mean we have to stick with that by any means. I mean, it doesn't mean right now, again, we've got a whiteboard as far as this is concerned. We've had a Board of Control direct us to go to fewer than 7, with talk in that of some people wanting 5. I won't tell you the entire board did, because that wasn't true. We did have some people who mentioned 5. We can set that up any way we want to. Obviously, when we look at football as a whole, 1A is 8-man football. We can't really combine the 1A with anything. We've said 2A and 3A are enrollment based. So we would keep those separate. That leaves us with the 4 championship games / classifications that we have now, 4A, 5A3, 5A2, and 5A1, to try to get those narrowed down at least by 1, if not by 2. But again, I just because our office has an idea that we brought forward doesn't mean that that's what we need to go with by any means. We need to hear from this committee what this committee thinks it wants, what it wants to propose to the board, so that we can take it forward. But I will caution that what we take forward, we want to make sure it gets approved by the board, because going through this process several times will only delay football scheduling. Mr. Paul Anderson, if I can kind of put you on the spot for a minute here, we always talk about how this affects the NAC as well. And we do need to make sure that we're staying within the NAC, but I don't think anything that we're talking about so far would violate that. Is that correct, sir?
Going down to 5 teams certainly wouldn't, that would be right in compliance with the NAC.
Other comments, other ideas, other questions?
Bart, I know I'm no longer a voting member. Lou Marcuse is for the record. I just wasn't sure, should we, the Northern Association and the Southern Association football coaches leaders, I believe they submitted initial proposals. Are we using those in this discussion as initial starting points for conversation? I'm just curious on, and I know I've missed the last couple meetings, but just curious if that's where we're starting from as we move forward, if we're using any of their initial proposals from previous meetings.
Anything can come back at this point for anything that we have. And any idea out there is possible at this point. We did hear, Mr. Jackson will pull you in on this too. We did hear some feedback from school administration that those proposals from football coaches maybe weren't in line with what the school administrators wanted as well. Mr. Jackson, I think you heard some of that as well.
Yeah, a couple of things here, Lou. A couple of proposals were brought forth from the South, from me, from the North. Most of those dealt with postseason. There was a lot of postseason talk about that. There was proposals that were brought forth that would say, okay, we're going to play the regular season, and then when we go to postseason, this is what we want it to look like. A couple of those involved travel, and we heard very loud and clear from some of the leadership that no, it's too much travel. And not that I'm opposed to that or anything. I mean, there were some really good proposals out there. There were also some other proposals that were brought forth that that we presented, and there was no action on any of them. So I think we've had some good proposals brought forth, but I will be honest with you, most of them to me affected the postseason, how we were going to function in the postseason. Which this isn't about the postseason right now. Obviously, we get to postseason formats at a later time after we establish how we're going to divide out. And I think those conversations can continue as to how we're going to establish the postseason. But you know, there's been a proposal brought forth that we get rid of all of it and we just everybody's 4A, and then in the postseason we break it apart into a 4A and 5A tournament. There's also been a proposal that we use rubric or max prep rankings for postseason. These are the teams that are competing in this tournament. These are the teams that would compete in that tournament. So there's been a lot of discussion out there. I will tell you that at the meeting in August, Bart, was it? Those proposals there was no movement. The committee didn't move on any of those.
But wasn't one of the reasons we didn't move on it was because of the rankings? If I can remember it, was that the main reason?
I would say one of the reasons was the ranking, Tammy, but the other reason that we didn't move, I can't say we, the committee, that one of the other concerns brought up was the amount of travel, that a team may be traveling north to south twice during the football postseason. And that was cost prohibitive. That I'm gonna be honest with you, I heard loud and clear on that one, that was going to be not very welcomed. There was a lot of concern about that. Whereas, you know, we look at other aspects of travel. You know, we have the 3A crossover game, which does the exact same thing And there's also discussion of that, whether we can maintain, whether the association can maintain that or whether schools can afford that cost as well. So the travel issue was brought up quite extensively in conversations leading up to that meeting. That was one of the other reasons. The ranking system with the Max Preps, I've been on record as saying that I'm concerned about the Max Preps rankings, obviously. But that was one that we were discussing, that there might have been some other way of ranking the schools using our own rubric. There was also the discussion of the pairwise system using that. While that was a little inundating and daunting for some people to grasp. But there was a lot of discussion about different ways of doing postseason, not regular season alignment. So that was, I want to make sure we're clear on that. Some of that had to do mostly with postseason. The regular season alignment had the 4A, 5A, and then the 1, 2, 3 divisions in there. And that's what the committee voted to take forward. And then also coming back and going into this manner of saying this is the 4A and the 5A as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Jackson, Habig, Mr. Marcoussis for that discussion. Yeah, that was something we definitely heard loud and clear. If you look at one of those proposals that Mr. Marcoussis was referencing, it included an open division. And if you looked at let's say the Max Preps rankings would be used, there was a possibility of a team to have to go from the one side of the state to the other 3 consecutive weeks. And that did not fly with the district leadership. And the 2 main districts obviously have voting members on our board of control. And not to say that that's the way they're going to vote, because we didn't vote on that proposal. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth with that. But Mr. Jackson heard it loud and clear. I did too, that the amount of travel for that would be difficult. And this is a little bit of semantics here, right? Because we say we're not talking about the postseason, but we kind of are talking about the postseason in this when we say that our board wants us to get to fewer than 7 championship games. That's where this really gets muddy and difficult to kind of separate. Other viewpoints here from our committee. Please, we want different ideas. Please speak up.
Bob Levitt, 5A, 4A North.
Mr. Levitt.
Thank you. I think it's important to at least have on the record, I'm hearing some conversation about the North, whether we belong in the 4A or whether we belong in the 5A, or whether we have schools that belong in the 4A or whether we have schools that belong in the 5A. And number one, I agree as a consultant and a non-voting member, but going back to the last realignment cycle, I think the schools in the North, certainly the schools we represent, Art, Chris, and myself, very, very clear that at that time, the schools felt that in interest of competitive balance, the best place for us was in the 4A. And so with respect to probably the proposal that's been put out there also, although it's a postseason proposal, I think it speaks to where the football coaches in the South believe the North belongs. And using the wording of that proposal says, should a team from the North happen to be ranked by Max Preps in the top 8 schools, that school or those schools would be included in that open postseason tournament. But it also goes on to say, so I think that speaks to whether the coaches in the South believe we belong in the 5A or the highest level division in the state. And then it goes on to say, even if we do qualify a school from the North for that tournament, the highest we could be seated was the 5 seed, because the 4 schools that won the 4 divisions in the South would be seated 1, 2, 3, and 4th. To me, the coaches from the South are speaking clearly that we don't belong in that division. To me, that's just my opinion on that. But I think it's important to consider when the conversation seems to be steering whether the North has schools that belong in the 5A or not.
Thank you, Mr. Levitt. The one thing that I'm going to stress here, and I stress it all the time, when we talk about classification and how it compares North to South, the teams that don't make the playoffs aren't being compared to anybody because they're not making the playoffs. And again, I don't want to get too far down the road here on separating playoffs and regular season. 5A in the North and 5A in the South, they don't meet until we get to the actual part of the postseason where they meet. They could be 5A and 27B, what they're called during the regular season. That part doesn't matter. The matchup doesn't come, at least the way we have things structured right now, until we get to the one game showdown for the championship at the end. We kind of lose sight of that sometimes, where team number 10 in the South and team number 8 in the North, if they're not going to the playoffs, then the classification that they're in when we start comparing North to South is really immaterial, at least in terms of postseason. Mr. Levitt mentioned Max Prep's rankings. It's always dangerous to take the rubric, the rankings, anything mid-season and think, if the season ended today, these are what they are. That all being said, if the season ended today, the Max Preps rankings have Bishop Manogue number 6, Spanish Springs number 9. Truckee is at number 7 and would not be looked at because Truckee is a 3A school. So there would be 2 northern schools under that proposal, Manogue and Spanish Springs, that would be 6th and then 8th adjusted, that would both be on the road. Just to give everybody a view of where it stands now: Bishop Gorman, Harborview, then Liberty, Coronado 4th, Faith Lutheran 5th, Manogue 6th, Shadow would move up from 8th to 7th, Spanish Springs would move up from 9th to 8th. That next team lurking is Reed, that would be right behind. Ms. Habig, you have your hand up. Need to unmute.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to hit the unmute. So I guess obviously I was at the Board of Controls meeting, so I think my frustration is we didn't get a lot of guidance.
Yeah.
But basically what I'm hearing is go find competitive balance, but we can't really have competitive balance because of mileage and money.
The hands are tied in certain areas. I won't disagree with that.
I don't think it was all, Tammy, I don't really think it was all mileage and money. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that we have 7 divisions of football in the state of Nevada. And
absolutely.
That's many. I mean, that's a lot.
It is a lot. And I agree with you. I mean,
technically to every 13th team. I mean, I think that's a concern. So I think mileage and money are factors that we need to consider, but I don't think they should be driving. I don't think they were the driving force there. I think the driving force was we have too many divisions of football. I think that was that's the message I took.
No, I agree with you on that one. But then they said, okay, here, go fix it. But really, to keep competitive balance, we can't fix it. If we can't, I mean, yeah, it's easy to say combine 1 and 2 and then put 4 down, but that's until we say that the North and the South both have to be in those divisions, it's not going to be competitive balance. I mean, the easy way to do it, for sure. The easy way to do it is just say, here, combine 1 and 2, move 3 down. But then if we're doing what's right and what's appropriate, that's not going to fix it.
I would come back with this as a counter to that. The original decision to divide 5A into 1, 2, and 3 used our rubric numbers as the deciding line. That's what they used. So we used a competitive balance formula to divide them. Now, whether we should have or not is immaterial at this point. But that to me says, okay, now what the second part of your argument is, you're saying, okay, so we use our rubric to divide it this way. We're going to go with 5A and 4A, and there's our line. And then now the question becomes, where does the North fit in most competitively in that group? Unfortunately, what I'm hearing, and I think, Bart, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the North fits in with what is traditionally 5A2 and 5A3, the most competitive than they do with the 4A. But there is no more 5A2 and 5A3. So then what I hear is this. What's remaining is the old 5A1, which is a very competitive division. We all agree with that. And now what do we do when we go postseason? That's what I'm hearing. Because at the end of the day, the North is going to play the Northern teams. The South is going to play the Southern teams. And when we get to postseason, where do we line up the brackets and how do we establish them? The coach's proposal that was sent out by Mr. Morocco to our committee said, let's use max preps. We put everybody in it and we look at it. We would have to adjust a few things out of max preps, obviously, because we have Truckee floating in there. We may have 1 or 2 teams. The issue then becomes, now, what do we do if we have, say, one team in the Max Preps rankings that is located geographically in the north and 7 teams in the south, which are obviously in the south? What do we do with that one team? We can't have them travel. Now the financial end comes into play. The other problem we would run into is, what if we end up with 4 up in the north, 4 down in the south? Yay, everything's perfect and great. Now, do we then adjust everybody else that's remaining in the south into what is now the 4A tournament? Or do we just say, you're out, that's the end, which I don't have a problem with. I'm not saying we should have everybody in the playoffs by any stretch of the imagination. That's what I think the committee needs to look at, is if we align into 2 divisions, a 5A and a 4A, then the next logical step is, how do we go to the postseason? That's the discussion that has to be had about the postseason for competitive balance. I think we have a situation here where we can put everybody into 5A or 4A based on the rubric, with the understanding where they go postseason. Remember, the rubric is geographically based. It's the southern rubric that we utilize for football, not northern rubric for football. That's a key point to remember as well.
A couple things I'm going to jump in real quick on what was just said. We don't have to go with the rubric to start with for fall 2025 through 2028. We can continue to do applying the relegation promotion system, and then take however we're going to draw the line from there and separate that way. It's a very distinct possibility that we do that. I also think if we look at going to 5, as we've mentioned, we do already have 6 teams. I believe that's the number. I'd have to go back and look, that are 5A2 in the north. The other 6 teams would be considered 5A Division 3 right now in the north. So they would split into 5A and 4A, at least under one proposal that's out there right now. There's a lot of ways, again, that we can go with this. I agree 100% with Ms. Habig's comment that we really weren't given a whole lot of direction other than get this to fewer than 7. And I think the reason we weren't given a whole lot of direction on this, there's not an easy way to do this. It's going to please everybody. And there is by no means a perfect way to do this. Not even close. Other comments, questions, thoughts?
Tony Posey, 4A, 5A South. So just for clarification, so today we just really need to decide how we're going from 7 to 5, right? We'll dig into postseason at the next meeting, or we got to solve all those problems today?
We can go hand in hand with that. Obviously, we have a postseason format that comes up at the end of our fall alignment for everything. Once we've heard all the appeals and get everybody locked in, that's our December 9th meeting. Do we have to go from 7 to 5 today? That's the loaded question there. We got to go to fewer than 7. Again, we heard from a couple of board members, they wanted 5. So I can't answer. Do we have to go 7 to 5? We've got to get something fewer than 7 today. Can we discuss postseason today? That could be a part of this for sure. I think anything's on the table.
Before we throw, real quick, Art Anderson, 5A, 4A North. Before we just go back to the 5, which again, I feel the North would be completely opposed to. What is 6 a possibility? Could we go back? I mean, we created 7 because people thought that the 6 wasn't working. Now they're saying the 7's not working. Can we go back to the 6 and see if that works again? Or are we completely against that?
I'm going to leave that up to other members of the committee. Our marching orders were fewer than 7. So, Mr. Jackson, do you want to chime in on that? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I don't. I want to hear what the committee has to say.
Okay.
Tony, 4A, 5A South, no disrespect to anybody that won a state title, but honestly, there were a couple of those games that should not have been state championship games. I mean, I don't know if 6 fixes that problem, but there were a couple of games that just in any other state in the world that, that would not have been a state title football game. And I know initially that was the point, we get more kids involved, and I understand that, but But if the point is to make these, more competitive and better football, I mean, I think that's something we need to consider.
Ms. Habig?
I mean, I think to go back and answer Art's question I felt like personally at the board meeting, there was only 1 or 2 people that were dead set on 5. I think everybody else was they just didn't want 7. So I think 6 could be entertained. Like Tony said, I mean, I agree 7's too much. 1, I know we're never gonna make everyone happy. I mean, I don't think that should ever be I don't think our goal should be to make people happy. I think our goal should be to do what's the right thing. But again, I don't know that we know what that is, because we are such a different state than everyone else with the travel. Because I mean, the real best thing would be where you do have to travel postseason. But if they're telling us we can't do that, then I don't know what the right answer is.
Other thoughts from our committee? I'm sorry if you can hear the background noise. The neighbor's having a tree cut down, so I apologize if that's coming through.
Hey Bart, this is Xavier. I know I'm a consultant on this, so I'm just gonna jump in. I think the South, just from listening, I feel like the 5A 1 and 2 combining and the 5A 3 and the 4A combining has some merit. I think some of those 4A schools are maybe happy that they don't have to go down and participate with the 3A, as they were catching some thumpings as well. So I think that's a positive. It sounds to me, and I would love to hear more from Art. I would love to hear more from Bob, because if the South does say, "Hey, we're good with this updated 5A and 4A," right? The impact and how that would work for the North, and I'd like to hear Bob and Art kind of their thoughts on that, because I think that's where the rub is right now. Is how do we, and I know again we're talking postseason, but we're not. How that kind of would fit in their thought process. So Art and Bob, I'd love to hear from you.
Well, just real quick, if we go back to how it was before we divided into the 7, how we have had it for 2 years, there was the 5A Division 1, which was the best teams down in the South. 5A Division 2 is where we matched up the teams from what was left before they went down to the 4A in the South, and then our top teams in the 5A, and then 4A would be we would split probably 6 and 6. 6 teams would be in the 5A, 2, and then 6 teams would be in the 4A, or 4A would simply just be a Southern State Championship, and we would keep all 12 teams in the 5A too.
So Art, I'm just going to jump in.
There would be 2 South. There would be 2 South only championships.
So Art, if I can ask this question, then what's the flavor for the Northern schools to have 6 schools in 5A, 6 schools in 4A? Or somewhere maybe it's a 5 and a 7, something that may be appropriate with the potential of going with 5 divisions.
I would just have to think that they would be against just if it's only a 5A where there's, because you're dividing 28 schools, I have to imagine down south. So you got at least 14 in one side, 14 probably in the other side, something like that. So it would be 14 schools to 5 or to 6 schools in the north. And I think that's where some of the, I guess if we're talking equal representation is not there.
Mr. Jackson, you've got your hand up if you want to jump into this.
I do. Thank you. There's been a lot of conversation about doing what's right and how hard it is to do what's right and making a decision that's right. I think what we're looking at here is a very specific set of parameters that we're trying to stay within the guardrails that were presented to us. And I get that, and I'm all about that. But at the end of the day, what I think we need to do more than anything is take a step back and look at this and say, what is the best alignment for this sport in the state of Nevada, regardless, period. Pretend the state's a mile wide, pretend the state's a countrywide. It doesn't matter to me at this moment. What I'm thinking is this. Currently, we have a 3A crossover game that's been there for years. It's been established, it's been there for years. We make that, the school districts make that work. We have not addressed that ever. We've never said we're going to get rid of the 3A crossover game. We've heard it, even if we have said it. So at the end of the day, what we're looking at is this. We can come to some sort of a consensus as a committee that states the following. We believe there are some teams in the north that are competitive with the top teams in the south. We believe there are some teams in the south that are competitive with some teams in the north. They cross over nicely. They fit. Why are we not proposing then to the board a very similar process like they have in 3A already, where we look at how we schedule the postseason and we put in the guardrails there to help alleviate that travel and that excessive cost that they're associating with it, which exists in other situations as it is. In other words, what I'm saying is this. We had a proposal a while back that said at the end of the season, we're going to go into 2 tournaments in the postseason. A 5A and a 4A, or a 5A 1 or a 6 or an open, whatever that was. Why are we not looking at that saying that's the proposal we bring to the board? Because then we have to go to the board and defend it. That's the key. We have to be able to defend what this committee sends forth. If we just say we're just going to come up with the easiest solution and just say that's it, we haven't solved the problem. The problem is not where the schools align. The problem is how we align the schools. So what I'm proposing, and I can't make a proposal, so I need somebody else to do this, is I think we need to bring back one of those proposals from either the Coaches Association or the Southern Coaches Association, the Northern Coaches Association, the one I had, the one Bart had, whatever the case may be. Which one makes the most sense for Nevada in football? And then we put it on paper. Then we go to the board, and at that board meeting, it's defended. Let the board look at why we rationalized it out. Think of it this way. There are times when the northern schools play in the 5A, and there's times when the northern schools play in the 4A. Why do they do that? Because they can justify with evidence and data to support their alignment is better fit here as it is to there. I think we need to stop trying to find a one-time solution for football and look at what is the smart play here. Like, for example, I think at the end of the season, if we put everybody into the leagues as we see fit, at the end of the season, if we have that, lack of better terms, that open division, call it the 5A state tournament, maybe there is 1 or 2 teams from the north that should play in that. And we work to establish a postseason seeding purpose that will allow them to not travel as much. Or if they have to, we do the one-time crossover game. We have to look at that. That may mean a state championship that is scheduled to be played in the south gets played in the north, or vice versa, whatever the case may be. I think we need to take all things into consideration and consider the fact that we have a very big divide, not in the state. We have a big divide in the football that we see our schools playing at a level. A lot of words there, a lot of information that I threw out, but I think we need to really say, what is the best solution for this? And just put it down and let's figure out where the chips fall after that.
Tim, which proposal that was brought forward do you think closest does that? Because I'm not gonna lie, that was 2 months ago. I don't remember.
I think there are a couple parts of a couple proposals. I don't have a problem with using, Bart mentioned the pairwise. That might be a little too out there for people to understand mathematically at this moment. We grew up in it, so we're kind of a little more familiar with it. I think the Southern Nevada football coach is one where they would use max preps rankings to pull the schools out at the end is good. We eliminate the schools that are enrollment based protected into the 3A, 2A, and 1A, obviously. I also think that we have our own rubric that we use. I think some of the factors that would play into it, I'm going to pick on Liberty right now. Liberty football played a lot of out-of-state opponents. We don't really have that pulled into our rubric the way Max Preps has it in theirs. My concerns with reporting of accuracy and reporting and the accuracy of the whole Max Prep things there. I think there's a piece out there that we can look at. I think we can pull together a system that works. I don't think we're far away from it. I just think it's so different than anything we've ever used before as a state of Nevada that it's kind of scary. It's daunting to look at it. Bart, I will pull you in for the mathematical expertise here. But I think we need to look at, a proposal that pulls people out based on where they finish has some credence that we should really look at, because it also takes into account this. I'll use the Silverado example. Silverado ran the table for 2 years straight. That class graduated. It kind of eliminated that possibility of running it for a third year. This proposal kind of doesn't. It's more of a, what are we doing now? It's very difficult. The other issue we're going to have to look at is we may have to ignore overall records of teams. Some teams are going to have losing records, but are going to have a higher ranking, basically because of where they're at. I take a look at Liberty football right now. Liberty football has a record of, 2-4, but they're ranked
2-5.
2-5, excuse me, 2-5, and they're ranked pretty high because of their strength of schedule. So we would have a lot of factors there. We would have to determine what we were going to use as the final rankings and how we were going to use them, and so be it. But I think that it warrants a discussion, because we have a round peg, a square hole, and a floating target, and we're trying to, hit a moving bullet with an arrow while riding on the back of a horse.
Mr. Jackson, let me ask you this as we kind of sit here and kick around ideas. We need to have at some point an emergency board meeting to approve whatever comes up policies and procedures wise. Have we scheduled that? Do we have a time on that?
I have a window, Bart, of mid-November. The reason I picked mid-November is I wanted it before the state football championships. That way we could come out of the state football championships and realign, so we were prepared for the appeals in December. So I was thinking 13, 14, 15, right in that window there.
The reason I asked this, and I don't mean to put any more work on this committee or anybody on it, is do we need to think about this for a week or so? Come back together. And I get that schedules are going to be terribly tight because we're getting into postseason. And that gets really difficult to start schedule times because a lot of our people on the committee need to be out at their postseason events for their school. But I don't want to rush this either. And we don't really have, at least what sounds to me like, anything close to a consensus on what to do. So do we want to think about taking a week? Man, I hate to say two, because then you start getting into like Nevada Day week and state tournament stuff for certain sports, and just throwing it out there, because I kind of feel like if we're going to kick around some different ideas, then maybe we also need some time for people on this committee to go back to the people they represent and see what everybody has to say. Thoughts on that? Mr. Marcouzis.
Just for the team's edification or the groups, is it possible that we could bring those individuals that represent their respective leagues and associations, whether it be the North and the South and the other, to either they can maybe meet and come up with one or two proposals, or bring back some initial proposals? Because I feel like we're kind of talking about, we're just pulling thoughts from the past and maybe see something more concrete. To your point, Bart, and Tim may have made it, like to move forward to the next committee so that we can defend it one way or another. Because nothing's going to be perfect. That's just the reality of the matter.
Mr. Levitt.
Yeah, Bart, I've been on the record before. I love what Tim's saying, and I think it bears a real strong consideration, or a need for a real strong consideration. My question, I think we do need more time, because the first thing that comes to mind for me is a truckie. So think we really need to hear from our 3A North schools or somebody from the 3A North, because what happens in a scenario like that, the first thing that comes to my mind with a Truckee. And so we get to that postseason and things start striating out in the postseason matchups. And what happens to a Truckee if that season ended today? Because I think we get a lot of pushback from a Truckee playing anywhere in the from Truckee anyway, having to go and play in any classification other than 3A for the state football championship. And so, but again, on the record, I love what I'm hearing from Tim. But that's just my opinion. I don't have a vote. So, but I would be concerned about not having some input today from representatives from the 3A on thoughts on that, and how it might impact a Truckee or an Elko here in the north.
Thank you, Mr. Levitt.
Tony Polzing, 485A said the 3A is protected though, right? They wouldn't go anywhere anyway.
The way we have it set up right now, that's correct.
That wouldn't affect Truckee at all. They would just stay 3A from my understanding of this. And just to kind of piggyback, like I like honestly, the coach's proposal I think was good, but I do agree with Tim, like anybody on a Friday night can make themselves the mandatory reporter or the scorer on Max Preps. I mean, it would take some work on the back end to make sure all that stuff's accurate, but yeah, I just re-looking through that coach's proposal, but I just wanted to also bring up that my understanding Truckee and all those guys would be protected anyway. So
thank you, Mr. Polzing. One thing I'll throw in real quick to kind of get back to Mr. Marcuse's comment also, we did hear from administrators at schools that our coach doesn't represent how we feel. So I don't know that just coaches, I think this needs to go through coaches, administrators, principals, everybody at the school, because the last thing we want to do too is approve something that one group wants and the other group doesn't want at all. And that could become an issue as well. But I mean, I pushed for the idea. And again, I hate to make this committee meet extra times. I'm so sorry. But I do think that we can't just push this through at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning after an hour's worth of discussion. We need to get some other people involved and kind of figure out what is best. At least that's the way I'm looking at it. And I may be totally off base.
Chris Madden, 485A North.
Yeah, Mr. Magram.
Kind of piggybacking on what Bob was bringing up. My question would be, if we're going to take some time, is there going to be any consideration? I realize the 3A is protected, but when we have somebody in the South commenting about, some of those 4A schools being happy they weren't in the 3A getting thumped by those schools, if we're talking about what's best, is it best to look at some of those upper tier 3A schools being able to move around to some of these other divisions if we're looking for what's best in fair play and kind of where they align best for a state championship?
Mr. Larson, speaking of the 3A, you've got your hand up also, sir.
Yeah, Dallas Larson, 3A South. I think none of that, we've already passed the 1A, 2A, 3A. That's a done deal. There's the board approved that. That's a done deal for this alignment these next 3 years. It just seems like to me like today, I mean, I feel like all this is something that we can handle once again if we have time after, if we decide to go 5A, 4A formats and all that. Couldn't that then be the meeting that we have weeks to prepare and decide how the 5A, 4A looks, who's in the 5A, who's in the 4A, is there a 5A, is there, I don't know. That just seems like to be the next meeting we're going to be having.
There's a yes and no to that, because we need to have actual policies that we're going to operate under of how we're going to put these teams into 5A and 4A. And that's something that we've got to approve and get approved by the board. It can't just be random draw or something like that. But yeah, I get what you're saying as well. Other thoughts, other comments? Are we, oh man, I hate to try to convince this committee to go in one direction.
Bart, can I pipe in for a second?
Please do.
Just wondering, and this is, take it for what it's worth. What I'm gathering here is the lack of conversation at this point as to where we go next is not a lack of understanding what we need to do, is more of a this is going to be a big move, that this is going to be a big decision. Because there's a couple things that have been thrown out today that we've discussed that are different. And what I'm hearing is that there are some pieces out here we really like, but at the end of the day, we want to make an informed decision. And I think that would behoove us to have that time. Today's the 15th. If Bart were to come back with a meeting on the 22nd or 23rd next week, could we get to our office? And I'm looking at you, Lou, right now, because you're on my screen. Could we get to our office a proposal from the south and the north? Doesn't have to be the same one, doesn't have to be identical, that would address 5 divisions with the potential for playoff formats that we could then look at and move forward, because I think we're just sitting here spinning our wheels right now because we all agree that we need something to go forward with, but we don't know exactly what that looks like. But at the same time, we can't delay this decision much longer because we're running out of time again. And we have a deadline we need to meet. So discuss.
What I was going to bring up, Mr. Jackson, and you kind of beat me to the punch on that, but that's good, is do we think about tabling this for a week? But in that proposal, I mean, we need to keep in mind something else too. When we talk about bringing these other proposals back, this committee already went away from them once. So does that mean something needs to be tweaked within them? I don't know.
Also,
feel
Bart,
like-
I'm going to step on you right
Go
here.
ahead.
I'm also going to step on you and say this. We've got proposals out there that we've already looked at that we're now bringing back, and we're saying, hey, maybe we should relook at this. But at the same time, I think what we got to do here is we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater and start this all over by any stretch of the imagination. I think what we've got here is we've got some proposals that we just need the committee to come together and say, all right, we're going to formulate it, and this is what we want it to look like, so that there's something for us to vote on, something for the committee to vote on, because we should not go back to scratch. I don't think we need to go back to scratch. If not, we're spinning our wheels very badly.
Ms. Habig, was that you that was going to try to say something there a minute ago?
I was basically gonna say almost what Tim said. I think that I don't necessarily think that we threw those other ones out. I think it was we just felt like going forward what we had previously didn't have, we all said, let's just keep going with it, because we didn't have the data, all of us thinking it was gonna get approved.
Mhm.
Now that it's not approved, I agree with Tim. I think, but it is hard right now because it's a lot to I don't know that anyone sitting on this meeting right now could say, I feel comfortable going forward with this. I think we need more time.
Is
As
a
much
week,
as I don't want to be on another meeting,
yeah.
I think we need. If we're gonna do the right thing, I think that's what we have to do.
Is a week enough time? What do we need here? Because obviously we get down to the end of the regular season for a lot of you in football, in soccer, in volleyball. We've got tennis postseason going on. Golf's going to end. We've got the cross country stuff coming up. Y'all know, right? Because you all been through it. Mr. Marcuzes. Need to unmute.
If we are to meet in a week, I think we need some like clear homework assignment rules, right? Because we've heard enough, like if we're not gonna, we need to engage with not just the Football Coaches Association, North and South. We need to engage with principals as well, because we're hearing clearly coaches say something, principals say hell no. So we almost have to be, in some ways, be very strategic. Like the football guys are going to have to meet with the principals or representative, like a clear representation of the principals to push forward some type of acceptable options, because we're going to continue to spin around this in this again, right? We're going to go, we like kind of what the coaches say, the principals say, because of whatever it is, buses, money, travel, start times, you name it, right? So we've got to, and again, I have nothing to, all I'm doing is throwing my thoughts out. I have no leverage. I'm not even supposed to be here, I guess. Right? So I'm just throwing it out there because I know how passionate this is. As a former high school principal, and no option is going to be perfect. Something else to consider, which has never ever been brought up before, which was mentioned in one of the proposals, is do we consider again the enrollment of the high school, regardless of the makeup of the high school, the enrollment of the high school. So as we have engaged in these meetings, we need to factor this in to come up with some plan. It's not going to be perfect in a week's time, so that the high school people don't push back on the coaches.
Are you sure you want to leave this committee, sir?
I mean, I'm happy to stay in no vote, nothing. I'll just cheap seat thoughts. I'm happy to be a part of it.
No, appreciate
and
it.
would love it, I'm sure.
I don't disagree with Mr. Marcus on this one at all. I think the big issue here is this. We also have to make sure that the information is brought forth to the committee in a timely manner. Because here's what always happens, and Lou, you know as well as I do. We'll make a decision, and then somebody's gonna say, well, nobody asked me. Nobody asked me. We have that constantly, and it's repetitious, and it's the same behavior we've experienced over and over again. I want to stress to the committee is this: we are not a jury. We're not weighing evidence. We're making a decision that is in the best interest of athletics in the state of Nevada for football and how we realign. We are never going to make everyone happy. We are never going to make everyone mad. The two teams that are impacted the most will be the most vocal because they are the ones that want to go the other direction. That always is the case. So what I would really stress is this. We have to have a definitive timeline. We have to have a decision, and we kick this down the road and further, because the further we more come with more and more ideas that maybe are serving their needs and not the global look that we need to on this. So please, if we do kick this down the road, please, we've got to put a deadline on this. And we got to make sure there's communication out. Like Mr. Marcus has communicated out to his constituents. I know Ms. Ches will get it out when it comes to the principals. That's very important. Association is listed on this day. I know Art Anderson is going to get in touch with the northern constituents, with the associations. I vital that we get guidance that we know we need. We need less than. I know I have a preference, and I hate to go on the record in saying it. I have a preference for 5. I've always had a preference for 5. But I will always yield to the committee. But we need to ensure we are oriented on this. We cannot kick this down the road any further.
To come back here and meet again to try to get some. Ms. Habig, I'm sorry, I kind of cut you.
I was going to say, I agree. I think fast, but if we put something for week, would that be enough?
We looked at the 9th.
Here, Mike, what are we looking for to come back?
To come back, yeah.
This in the big picture. So what are we going to set, or as I can say, 6 divisions, we don't have what it is for possibility looking for regular season. What I'm afraid is this: we step away from this meeting and you're at golf today, Tammy. I'm going to afternoon. Lou's got a new position. We're going to push again, kicking it down the path again. That set a sideline. We're just be kicking it down the road. So I'm concerned with that. Do I think that's enough time? Enough time for what? I mean, I can tell you right now that I guarantee you my going off. I'm going to give suggestions to us right away. I think the next meeting, Bart, and this is on our office more than anything. I think the next meeting we need to come with a proposal from the NIAA as a staff to this committee that lines up with what we vision this being, and it's our proposal to the staff. And at that point, they can look at it and tweak it instead of going back to everybody and coming up with stone soup. We need to come back with our own soup and be done with it.
Mr. Marcus, you've got your hand up. Just give me just a second on this one, if you would, sir. All well and good with that. We need to remind everybody that if you're going to propose something in here, what we are looking for are the policies and procedures we need to follow in order to put classifications. It can't just be, oh, I want school A here, school B here, school C here, school D here. We have to come up with the framework of how we're going to do things.
I would concur with Tim. I think if they come up, we already know no matter what proposal's being submitted, it's not going to be perfect. But if Tim were to look at elements of the framework from previous proposals, come up with we already perfect NIAA proposal. Let's read, and honestly, maybe for the good of the state, we pay principals and football coaches. We send a survey. It goes out to the pool. It goes out to the football coach. Down. We already know it's not going to be perfect, and we'll see. We survey principals and the football coaches, or athletic directors, and this is the percent that agrees, disagrees, or whatever it might be. And then we like to Tim's point, defend it at the next step, and then let the chips fall where they may, so to speak. But Tim, I concur. Thank you, sir, for bringing that up.
Thank you, Mr. Marcuzis. Other comments, other thoughts? There have been a few of us with our voice. I know we haven't heard and perhaps everybody doesn't necessarily need to voice an opinion. They may just agree with something that's been said, but I want to make sure we don't miss anything here.
Just real quick, I just Art Anderson, 58 North, 4 North. I just former social studies teacher, like a lot of us probably are. I just feel like we got to look at the history of this whole thing, and it looks like we're going right back to what we had before, and I don't see. I to break it down into 5 divisions. That would be, then we would match up north, south, and all the divisions. I just don't see that, but I could be the old curmudgeon on the board, and I'm just worried that we're just delaying unless the NIAA comes back some kind of, like this last one when we divided into the 7 divisions that came from the NIAA. I don't see how anything other steers us in the right direction.
Muddy the waters even further. If we would go to 5, there's nothing that says all 5 have to be statewide. And I hate to bring that up, but again, I don't know that there's anything that's off the table right now. Anyone else? So let's start talking about timeline.
Yes, I Tony 45 South.
I'm sorry, somebody else.
I know, like, I can recall the football coach and with the plan you'd presented last time, Bart. Did we ever get any? And I know this is extremely short notice and a lot of work on your part. Like the pairwise system would actually look like if you plugged in numbers. Do we get anything like that?
The committee had not received that. Something I have worked on. I've got pairwise and running in the background for football that could, again, anything that we do on our end, rubric-wise, pairwise, really measure south against south, north against north. Doesn't measure north against south. So that a little bit tricky in there. But it's something I could share because again, it's running and it's not, and it's going to take 2 weeks or 3 weeks to put together. Again, we're looking at partialization though, because it's concluded.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah. Timeline wise, this committee, tell us what we need here, what you think you need to get the information you feel is best to make a decision to push this forward to the board. Mr. Jackson, I could talk all we want to. In the end, we don't have a vote in this. Ms. Habig, you've unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just said, I was gonna say, I think if we set something for the week of the first some week, that gives us some time, and then having that point, I think we have to make a decision.
Do we look at the 20th coming up? That Friday before isn't a day if my memory serves, and on my calendar is all sorts of junk. But the 29th would be 14 days from today, so that'd be a Tuesday. It would be Wednesday. We'd have to look time in May similar to what we are now, because if we the afternoons, many of you are going to have postseason events. Does that work for people? Do we want to table this until then? I see a couple of nodding of heads. Mr. Jackson, is that going to work for us timeline wise, and what we may need to do to try to get stuff out to everybody? Or can we make it work? Maybe it's the better question.
Is, what are we looking for? Is the NIAA plan to is this to read as many possibilities as possible and create multiple plans? That would be my first request. If this committee wants one plan from the NIAA coming back for the entities and come up with additional plan, we need 2 weeks. So that's what I would say is paramount to this. What does the committee want to see at the next meeting? That can decide when the next meeting will occur. regardless of what it is. There's nothing, oh, this is a bad day. It is what it is.
Open question. What does the committee?
Now, Sergeant
Mr. Larson?
South, I mean, like we've a lot of those proposals. So when you've seen all those proposals, seems like you could take those, boil it down to one proposal that the NIAA staff likes, and back to be the easiest way, in my opinion. But I'd hear from the 4A more than anything.
Tony Posey, 4A5A South. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we've looked at three, and there were both, and you guys that, and I'm not on the board of control, and sometimes we can't attend because we're too busy dealing with bullying packets and things like that. But I mean, you guys know the flavor the board of control wants. So, I mean, if you guys come like this is what'll fly, I think that would be beneficial, because we've looked at the other plans, and at the everyone's like, here's the board approve, and then let's go from there.
Other committee members?
I'll go on record and say that I think the NIAA needs to get with the plan for. I need to see what a NIAA plan for 5 looks like.
We want to do that, and I come up with a plan and bring it back to this committee before I even finish. Mr. Marcoussis.
Dare we say, Tim, or is this one plan, or are you wanting, Tim, 2 plans? I don't, maybe that's not right to say. Just bring one plan and just live or die.
I don't think it's live or die, Lou. I think what we should do, what I think it should be is that I think we should bring back the one plan, let the committee look at it, and if we have to tweak, we tweak at that point.
I would agree with that too. Do we need a motion for that?
We're going to get to what we need a motion for. I think I just want to be good with that idea. At the end, I come back something. Do we need to go a different direction? Because I think what our motion is going to end up being is that we table this. Mr. Anderson.
Well, just real quick, everybody's heard enough from me, but I feel like we have a plan that's on the table right now, that if we were to go to just 5 only, the North would want to stay just 4A. So 5A only, there'd be a 4A, 5A North, and then South. And I think that would be, I mean, that's what the North would want. So that being on the table right now as a plan.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Habig, you unmuted. I don't know if it was because there was some stuff going on there.
I just feel like I know everyone's probably sick of hearing my voice too, but I can say that the South probably doesn't agree with that. So I think a new proposal probably needs to come forward.
And for the record, I'm not tired of hearing either one of your voices. So I appreciate all the insight.
And I agree with that. And I think the North would I think the North would even agree with possibly a plan that involved 2 teams lead. If we're going down to 5 divisions only, classifications only, like what we have currently, I think the North would be receptive to, we have a team or 2 that would fit into the top 8 in the league, that we would be open to that, something to what the coaches are talking about. I'm just worried about the financial part of that.
Mr. Marcoussis.
More for the proposals. The teams that list, they have seen it. Minogue, Double Ranch, McLean, Reed, Rios, Spanish Things, and Lena as kind of upper tier. Is that a safe starting point for considering if Tim to do this, or is that those teams not really in terms of fall? Those are the teams we look at the wrong teams.
It would be something similar to the Bay 2 currently would be our top teams. 3 are lower teams. Then give from 1 moving up, moving down. So it's roughly those teams. It's probably possibly be not based on how they do this year, but you're looking at Bishop Oak, Spanish Springs, Reed, Reno, Douglas. I apologize if I leave somebody out, but then Galena possibly moving up and one of those teams moving down.
Yeah. So it could be a smaller contingent of that group of teams, potentially an elite, potentially for consideration's proposal as a possible, if they are to play in a, not play in 4A playoff, just as a starting point, if anything, for discussion. And I'm only framing it, Art, that way is like if Tim's going to put together one proposal, if they're going to propose something that at least is the right network of teams for those individuals to be familiar with the higher teams in Reno.
Right.
Or in the north, I should say.
Absolutely correct. I just, the only concern that comes with that is them up, it's 14 teams possibly from the south and those 6 teams from the north.
Correct. Like it could break down from like 2 or 3 or 2 divisions in the south, 1 in the north. Like we would have almost look like 3 divisions or conferences in the state to be. Then we would have to worry about postseason and how that would look. That would be part of Tim's plan, but at least there could be some balance where it would have a similar amount of teams, and with the that say 5 teams now as opposed to 9 could potentially work potentially.
Correct. It would involve, I feel, to represent the north, it would have to be like we would finish our season and the top 4 teams would be involved in some kind of matchup to the somehow with the South. Because if we're separating before that, then we really don't have our top teams. I guess looking at how the schedule would come out, it seems like we would have teams possibly trying to play down to get into a lower.
And I'm sorry, Bart, I don't mean to go back forward. I'm just like, could it be, and Tim, for your edification, could it be something where uniquely there is this alignment within season, kind of that open concept where we could consider we're breaking monthly, but then there's essentially this realignment within those divisions, as opposed to state. I think the proposal initially was open statewide, but maybe open within each league or conference, then to be seated to play. Again, we're not making a decision, just for Tim, for your thoughts in the back of your noggin as you're designing the one master plan that you have.
I would love my Mr. Burns, for those of us that are old enough to remember The Simpsons entering its 37th year of production, and say, but all those are being taken in. I started to start sketch and to draw, which is one of those things I like to do. And I think that those are all warranted, Art. I think I hear what you're saying, Art, and don't worry, there'll be a conversation about this as I start to develop it and work with Bart and everyone else to come forth with what we recommend. I think all these things are valid because I do hear what you're saying, because we often discussed about the fact when we align based on past data, and then we go to postseason based on past data. And now we're looking at a potential looking at live data. So a lot of different that are going to be in touch with everybody with and get that input, because I do see what you're saying, Art. As we have in the South, the interesting thing here is the situation that Art described in the North is not different than the South. It's a fact. I mean, 4 out of 8 is 50%. 50% is 50%, with the 50% down in the see the things. So I think it's very important that we look at all those. So I will all those things, and yes, thank you, Luke.
Or just somebody.
That would be called the Ohio two-step bar. Way 2-step right out of the way.
Yeah, I'm good with that. Any other comments for committee? And The other thing too, I don't want to drag this on forever, but we've got to talk timeline here. How soon do we want to turn this around and come back and meet again?
You give me a deadline, I will meet it.
I was just gonna say, how fast can you do it, Tim?
Well, Michigan
How about
football is
noon?
not really that great this year, so I'm really not tied up on the weekends watching those guys play. If they need to pick a quarterback, let's be honest. So I can work on it over the weekends and I can get to work on it. You give me a deadline, I will meet it.
Are we looking next week for this committee, or are we looking 2 weeks?
Would it be impossible to see like a couple recommendations by next week and then possibly being able to send those out to our people we represent and then coming back within 2 weeks for the meeting?
I'd tell you it works for me, but I'm not the one that's doing that there till I get told of it. Mr. Jackson?
I just don't look back on what I'm at. Is I don't want to say, okay, committees sort of guiding me with one, send one and come back in 2 or 3. So I think correctly what I'm hearing is perhaps come back with 1. So if any, then we look at then the committee can say, hey, listen, let's send those tweaks out and say, how's this look? Or are you saying you want 1 or maybe 2 or 3? That's then we're getting involved, we're getting a little more, and I think we're moving sideways that. So just give guidance a deadline.
I just feel like we gotta, I would just with you just one you think is like, again, I have to go back to where we're divided to 7 to work, except for the board now doesn't seem that it works. So one that we could look at and say, yeah, this is going to work, or we might have to tweak it this way or work against this, and then go from there.
Let me throw this out there again. Going to the committee members and saying, hey, what do your people think? If you haven't had time to talk to your people, it becomes a little bit difficult. So again, we don't want to kick the road and get all stuff, but I really do think for you to talk to the people you represent, do you want to come back and meet maybe on the 29th? Does that work? Mr. Jackson, or are we waiting too long on that? I want to give you time to make sure you get through and I get through everything we need to on this. But I also want there to be time for back from other people.
I'm good with the 29th.
Does that work with everybody else? Okay. What I would
Oh, wait, did I
suggest,
say 29th? I'm sorry, Bart.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, this is the 29th. Yeah, never mind. Failed my math class. Yeah, 29th. That'll work for me.
I mean, it's that whole Fostoria thing. I get. So what we would probably look for at this point, and make sure that I've got legal counsel in on this, because I can't make a motion, but I kind of maybe direct, not the word. Let's say suggest maybe to the committee that we make a motion here for item number 8, that we table this item until a meeting. Jack's back with the proposal, the committee to contemplate and potentially pat that point. Mr. Paul Anderson, are we okay with that?
Yeah, just need a vote to make that motion.
Can I?
Sure can.
I'll make a proposal that we send this recommendation to this committee, sends a recommendation to the NIAA to devise a proposal that we break it into 5 classifications for state tournament in football.
That's your motion? Just checking, because I heard proposal. I just want to make sure that's a motion.
Our proposal. Yeah, proposal. Our motion, which would
yeah, I just needed the wording on that. Do we have a second? Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Say big seconds. Any further questions, discussion, comments?
Tony, 4A, 5A South. I don't want to put the cart before the horse. Is it possible though, to get planned for the 29th meeting and share it so we can come back on the 20th and put this thing to bed?
Mr. Jackson's nodding,
Yes.
I'm nodding. I believe the answer is yes.
Yeah, so we can see it, get it shared out and then say, hey, we're going to get this thing done on the 29th. So we can quit kicking the can down the road, for lack of a better way to put it, right?
Tony, we're not gonna play God.
Mr. Odegaard.
I think it's important that the principals be informed before we get to that meeting, because that's happened to this committee before where decisions are made and then back the principals are happy and then we have to go back again. So I think it's imperative to hear from the principals before that meeting.
The veiled reference to the midnight surprise.
Our next in-law meeting on the 20th.
So the lover comes together.
Where's that gonna be held?
It's informal, Tim, virtual.
Virtual, I'm invited.
Do you have a second to that motion, Barb?
A second from Ms. Habig on that. Yep, no, you're good. Habig. Other comment? It's quite a discussion we need to have a vote. Okay, at 7, all in favor of the motion, please state by saying aye. Are there any opposed? Okay, thank you so much for that. We will move on then to item number 9, committee member comments for the good of the order for discussion only here. Again, we'd be looking at an October 29th meeting. We'd be looking at probably a morning meeting once again, so that we don't interfere with any postseason events that you may need to be at. Any other committee members want to comment at this point? Number 10 is public comment. This provides a need for citizens to address the committee about any matter not listed on the agenda raised during this portion of the agenda cannot be deliberated or acted upon until notice procedures of the open meeting law have been met. Should a member of the public wish to speak on a matter not listed on the agenda, it is asked that said person complete a public comment card and submit it to an NIAA staff member prior to the opening of this item. A limit of 3 minutes per person and/or 5 minutes for the spokesperson may be imposed. It's requested that comments be directed to the committee as a whole. Comments that are deemed to be irrelevant, repetitious, offensive, inflammatory, willfully disruptive, or deemed to be personal attacks. We were in front of one person wanted to make public comment. I did send that person a link to this. They have logged in. Does Jackson have any public comment?
I know from to
If
make
you would unmute.
Was that?
That is the person sent this meeting invitation. Do we have any public comment from any of our other VIPs? I do not see any in the email.
Just
Do
a
you?
second. Let's see. The only comment I have an email from Mr. Mo that he'd like to make a public comment, but if he's not logging in, I don't know.
Get the same one as well, and it's sending that Zoom code.
Mr. Davis, I did send, I just texted Morocco. He's trying to attempt to log in at the moment, stand by or not. Difficulty at literally.
I'll give him a minute or two. Time thing. Ms. O, can you be getting logged in? Trying to go through my list of attendees quickly as well. Mr. Morocco, are you there? I come out of so quick and just to give me a little bit better out of trying to. Okay, you'll comment, sir.
Yeah.
Whenever you're ready.